Trixie is still here, from The Longest Day, Longest Night, by Rainbow Double Dash. Trixie shot off, running for the rear entrance to the court. The other 5 ponies followed quickly. Beyond the ruined court was a wide plaza, probably a former courtyard. The trees of the Everfree had yet to encroach on it, meaning the entire plaza was covered in a slushy, melting snow that covered the ground beneath them. Trixie paused as he entered, letting out a huge sigh of relief as she did. A slight tingling sensation was running across her body, but she talked it up to nervousness, fear, and mounting exhaustion. Sitting in the plaza, near the exact center, was what looked like a sculpture made from obsidian. Rising in its center was a pillar of volcanic glass, about 10 feet tall. At its tip stretched more than a dozen long spikes made from the same stone, each a different length. The 5 longest spikes, at their ends, were impaling 5 large stone spears, each of which bore a different mark carved into their surfaces. It looked almost like a sculpture of a star in a nova, and it definitely looked far too delicate to have possibly withstood a millennium of not being tended to by master stonemasons. The most interesting part of the statue, though, was that it was bare and smooth. Despite the low fog and the snow all around it, the statue itself was dry. Even more so than the rest of the palace, this place seemed almost utterly still and inert. Trixie let out a sigh of relief as she turned around, gesturing to the statue. "The elements of," she began, when she noticed that the other 5 ponies were casting their gazes around in a panic, none of them looking at her. "Where did she go?" Carrot Top demanded as he trotted forward several places, nearly running down Trixie before the unicorn sidestepped out of the way. "Trixie?" "I'm right here," Trixie said, looking down at her hooves. Or trying to, anyway, as her hooves seemed to have vanished, along with the rest of her body and clothing. "Or not. Okay, I'm invisible. Must be the poison joke." "She can't have just disappeared," Cheerily interrupted. "I totally can, actually, but, Maybe one of the traps is still active?" Dizzy Doo asked, as he beat her wings several times, getting to the air, as he searched the courtyard surface, presumably for any sign of a trap having gone off. "Every pony stay in place for a second. And I'm inaudible," Trixie observed, eyes narrowing. Not that anybody could see her look of concentration, apparently, but at least she knew she was making it as she trotted over to Carrot Top, who was nearest. "Except I can hear me. I can't see me, though. That doesn't make a lot of sense." Trixie extended a hoof and poked Carrot Top's neck. "Ah!" The Earth Pony exclaimed, leaping sideways in fright. "Something just touched me!" "What?" Raindrops asked, joining Dizzy Doo in the air, though looking more like she intended to land with extreme prejudice on something rather than remain in the air for safety. "What was it?" "I don't know." Trixie sighed, looking down at the slush in the ground and drawing out 4 letters, or trying to. Her hoof just seemed to pass through the slush without being able to interact at all, which adamantly made sense, to an extent, since no pony had noted hoof tracks with no owner being made when she had gone up to Carrot Top. "But I can touch you guys," Trixie noted. She tried her telekinesis and found it similarly unable to affect the slush, but a brush of Carrot Top's hair was apparently possible, eliciting another surprised shout from her, as despite her telekinesis working, the normal telltale blue evanescence was missing. Trixie thought a moment, then stamped her hoof, not that it made a sound, when an idea came to her. She took off her hat and cape, also rendered invisible, somehow. Trixie did not understand Poison Joke's rules, and threw the ladder around Carrot Top's back, despite her protests, and then setting the former down on top of the Earth Pony's head. Carrot Top froze in place. "It's on me," she said in a very frightened voice. "Whatever it is, it's on me. My back and my head." The other ponies approached cautiously, as Trixie observed, waiting for them to figure things out on their own. She frowned, as she did, though. You, you wanted to poison Toke first, she observed. Why were you affected first? Lyra reached Carrot Top first. Your head? She asked softly, staring above Carrot Top. The Earth Pony nodded softly. It must be Earth Pony fortitude, Trixie decided, waving her hoof through the slush again. It was a unique sensation, passing through solid matter, or solid-ish matter anyway. Unicorns are far more delicate than Earth Ponies. Raindrops will probably be next, then you. Hold real still, Lyra said, as her horn began glowing. Well, shout, she last dealt with telekinesis, grabbing whatever it was that had perched on top of Carrot Top's head. As her golden aurora wrapped around it, it outlined the general shape of Trixie's hat. There, Trixie said happily. See? Just my... It was trying to my head! Carrot Top exclaimed as he backed away. Look at the size of its mouth! Ah! Something's still on my back! Trixie's eyes narrowed in annoyance. They swiftly widened, however, when Lyra threw her head down onto the slush, and raindrops landed on it with all four hooves, stopping several times. You idiots! The normally blue, currently transparent unicorn exclaimed, stomping out the raindrops. Leave my hat alone! Raindrops paused in her stomping, hefting the hat upwards with one hoof, still grasping Lyra's telekinesis, regarding the shape and feel of it. I don't think it's a monster, Raindrops observed. I think it's a hat. Carrot Top paused. She had been wrestling with Trixie's cape. Trixie terribly grasped of its ends in his mouth and pulling it as well. Trixie wasn't as concerned for the cape as it bore several fortifying enchantments that made it far sturdier than its plain cloth would suggest, but her hat did not have such protection. Worst of all, she couldn't even see the damn it. A hat? Carrot Top asked, then paused as she shifted a little, feeling the invisible thing on her. And this feels kind of like cloth. Wet cloth, but that's probably the slush. Thank you for that, by the way, Trixie said, sighing as she struck a hoof up to her hat and began waving it around. The other ponies all started at the sight of Lyra's aura moving around on its own accord. Terribly exclaimed suddenly, though she still had a mouthful of cape. She spat it out and tried again. It's Trixie! She's invisible! Lyra frowned at that, extending her telekinesis. Sure enough, her aura spreading through Trixie outlined the general shape of a unicorn, as Trixie set her hat on top of her head, ignoring the fact that it was now wet. Somehow, despite her not being able to interact with the slush. Poison joke don't make sense. She waved at Lyra as she grasped her cape on Carrot Top's back and retrieved it, ignoring its wetness as well. What she got in return for the wave, however, was a series of annoyed stares. This isn't funny, Trixie, Terribly observed. I'm not doing it on purpose, Trixie exclaimed, throwing her four hooves in the air. She jabbed a hoof at Raindrops, then Carrot Top, then herself, and proceeded to repeat the process. Oh! Carrot Top exclaimed. It's a poison joke! Thank you! You can turn some pony invisible? Dizzy Doo asked. It can do just about anything. It's magic! Carrot Top explained. Like I've said, it plays a joke on you. Take something you love and twist it. Oh, I get it, Terribly said. So I guess it's because Trixie always wants to be flashy and noticed, so the poison joke turned her invisible and silent. Trixie made a mental note to make sure to later inform Charlie that she had been glaring at her after that comment. Probably, Carrot Top confirmed. It probably affected Trixie first since she's a unicorn. Unicorns on average don't have the same kind of toughness as Pegasi or Earth ponies. No offense, Lyra. And Trixie. None taken, Lyra said simultaneously. So Raindrops, you'll probably be poof! There was an explosion of green from Carrot Top's mane and tail. The two of them almost instantly tripled in size, at least. It changed color from orange to a dark green. shooting out from her head and dark like streamers. Even after the initial explosive length, they continued to visibly grow, albeit at a much slower rate. Carrot Top had frozen in place again, eyes wide, probably anyway, as her eyes were now covered by a mass of green. She looked behind her as well. My mane! She exclaimed, my tail! She tried to flick her tail, but the sheer mass meant that it got nothing more than a fake twitch. The other ponies rushed over to her, the golden aurora around Trixie disappearing as she joined them, despite not being visible. Are you okay? Dizzy Dew asked, eyes wide and mostly coming to focus as she examined Carrot Top's mane, holding it up to her hooves. The longest strands were an easy 6 feet long at this point. It's still growing! Where's it coming from? Raindrops asked. Magic, Trixie said, then faced her when she remembered her predicament. Fortunately, Lyra said as much a moment later. Carrot Top had closed her eyes, forcing herself to calm down. I've always been proud of my mane, she started. So that's how Poison Toe got me. Still growing, Trixie observed, emptying up a mass of it with one hoof, enlisting a slight jump for Carrot Top. Maybe an inch every 10 seconds. Carrot Top stared more or less at Trixie. Do you think you could keep Trixie hydrated, Lyra? She asked. I don't need constant scares. Not really, Lyra observed. I mean, I could, but then Trixie wouldn't be able to walk around on her own, and I doubt she wants that. Dizzy Dew trotted over to where she guessed Trixie was, extending a hoof cautiously. Trixie tapped it back, and Dizzy used that as a guide to get beside Trixie, and extend one wing over her back. There. She's here. Thanks! Trixie and Carrot Top said simultaneously. Raindrops tapped a hoof on the ground. So I'm guessing it really is just random, she said as she, Charlie, and Lyra helped Carrot Top get her still growing mane out of her eyes. But I'm next either way. We need to focus though, Charlie said, as Carrot Top looked more morosely at her mane. The elements of harmony. Trixie ran off looking for them. Are they here? Yes! Trixie responded, first sighing forget her own forgetfulness. She gently extended her telekinesis around Dizzy Dew's head and neck and made the Pegasus nod. Surprisingly, Dizzy didn't resist. Apparently she anticipated that Trixie would need to do that exact thing. She's making me nod my head, Dizzy said, so that's a yes. Poof! Everybody blinked at the sound and turned to look upwards, except for Raindrops. The jasmine-colored Pegasus, having grown to be more than 30 feet tall, looked down instead at the other 5 ponies. She blinked a few times. Oh no! She boomed, every pony else covering their ears at the sound of her voice, which had dropped several octaves and was loud enough to be felt as much as it heard. Sorry! She whispered after a moment, as he backed away from them gingerly, her host steps shaking the ground slightly, and sat down as best she could in what had suddenly become a very narrow space. You okay? Sorry, that's Carrot Top. You alright? Carrot Top asked, brushing her still growing mane out of her eyes. It was now at least 8 feet long, and her tail was even longer. Fine, Raindrops whispered, though her size meant that she was still as loud as a normal pony's regular speaking voice. She looked between each of them. Why are you a giant now? Charlie asked. Insecurities about being a big, clumsy oaf when flying properly, Raindrops observed. Either that, or insecurities about my anger problem and the possibility I might hurt somebody when I'm being a big, stupid ball of fury. You have an anger problem, Lyra asked, but you seem calm. Oh, she has them, Trixie confirmed, vividly remembering the events of Stars Above. Had it really only been yesterday afternoon? It seemed like forever. Trixie stifled a yawn, then realized that no pony could see her anyway, so there wasn't much point. Technically, Trixie, by my count, it had been about last week. Raindrops also nodded in confirmation to Lyra's question. I've got a lid on it, mostly. She looked at Charlie. Anyway, you were saying? The Earth Pony blinked a few times at how Raindrops was taking her new size, then shook her head and looked back to Ditsy-Do. Or rather, Ditsy's left, where Trixie was still under the Pegasus's wing. So, the elements are here, she said. Where? Trixie pointed at the obsidian statue, paused, slapped her face with her hoof, and then grasped Ditsy's hoof and made the Pegasus point. All the other ponies looked at the statue, Lyra's horn beginning to glow as he examined the statue. I don't feel anything, she said. They're fake! She demanded, forgetting to whisper. Lyra shook her head quickly to let she anger Raindrops to tighten. No, I don't feel anything. Magic's supposed to be everywhere and in everything. Even when I was over-channeled, I still had a bit left in me, and always would. But looking at the statue, it's almost like all of the magic had been stripped away from it. I didn't know that was possible. I was happier not knowing it was possible. Trixie nudged Ditsy-Do slightly, and the two began trotting forward, up to the statue, stopping within a few feet of it. Trixie reached out telekinetically and began yanking one of the orbs. It became free surprisingly easily. When it reached Trixie, it was completely smooth stone, except for an arcane mark carved into its surface. The spot where the obsidian spikes should have been impaling it simply disappeared. Kindness, she stated, handling the orb off to Ditsy-Do. The other ponies, sans Raindrops, and with Carrot Top now lugging an easy 12 feet of mane and tail, crowded around it, looking at it. That's kindness, I think, Shirley remarked, with Lyra nodding. Lyra, Trixie, do you think you could get the other four down? It took only a few seconds for the unicorns to take down the 5 orbs, setting them down in a pile that the ponies quickly surrounded, looking over. Generosity, Lyra said, pointing to the one in front of Carrot Top, and then began counting them off. Honesty, laughter, kindness, and loyalty. She finished with the one in front of her. At least that's what they told us at Camelot. We're missing one, Shirley noted. The 6th element. Which one was that? Carrot Top asked. Shirley, Lyra, and Trixie all shrugged. It's a mystery, Shirley explained. No pony knows, and whenever any pony asks Princess Luna, the rumors say she just smiles. It's not a rumor, Trixie said. Luna loves being mysterious. It's annoying. No pony heard her, of course. Instead, Shirley began trotting around the statue. I don't see the 6th element. It's not here, Trixie said. It wasn't the last time either. When I asked Luna where it was, why am I bothering? Did some pony steal it? Raindrops asked as he squinted and leaned forward, looking closely at the nearest element to her. Honesty. Trixie once again grasped Ditsy's head, though this time she made it sick. Trixie says no, Ditsy-Do answered. So, where is it? Lyra asked. After a moment, she realized her mistake. Right. Yes or no questions. Is it nearby? Maybe, Trixie asked, sighing. She tried to conjure up an illusion of the words with her horn, but like her telekinetic aura, it was invisible. Nor could she conjure ghost sounds. Just right in the slush already, Lyra insisted. You are being added to my list of ponies I'm going to go at later, Trixie responded. She shook Ditsy-Do's head. I don't think she can, the Pegasus said as her head shook. She probably would have thought of that already if she could. I like you most, Ditsy-Do, Trixie said as she got out from under her wing, then put a hoof to her shoulder and used the point of it to trace out a letter on Ditsy's coat. She continued doing this a few times, until Ditsy-Do put the idea together. Okay, hang on. Trixie's going to write something on my coat. Sort of. I get the idea. Trixie, just go slowly. It's my first time, too, Trixie said under her breath, chuckling a little as she began to write. No pony knows, Ditsy read. Luna tell me just gave stupid riddle. What was it? Charlie asked. Said it was right beside me. The parties all thought about that one. What? That? Raindrops asked, extending a massive hoof and pointing at the statue. The statue itself? No, Dizzy responded as Trixie wrote. That was behind me. Oh! Charlie exclaimed. Magic! Like your kitty mark. Get it? Because it's beside you. Trixie rolled her eyes. No. See how Dizzy said, that's on me, not beside me. Charlie deflated somewhat. Oh, she said, right. Maybe it was Princess Luna? Dizzy guessed, then read out her response. No, she says Luna was in front of her. The princess paused. And that she hates Luna right now. Gotta admit, I'm not too fond of her right now either, Raindrops whispered. Saving the world shouldn't be this hard. The steps shouldn't be something like journeying through a deadly forest to a ruined castle past death traps in order to retrieve ancient artifacts and then figure out how to use them. It should be simple like, push this button. But that wouldn't be heroic enough, Raindrops. Trixie agrees, Dizzy said as Trixie made her nod her head, and then read as Trixie wrote. Trixie says she's tired. Charlie cited that. She's got a point. We need to rest. We've all been up too long and aren't thinking straight. We should take the elements and hide them somewhere. Trixie sighed. Can't move them, remember? She asked as she hefted one at random, the element of generosity, and threw it. After about 30 feet, it hit some kind of barrier and bounced back. Trixie caught it as it did, and set it down in front of Carrot Top. I think Trixie just showed us we can't take them from here, Myra observed. She sighed. We still don't know who set off all those traps. We'll rest while we can, Charlie said. Corona will be tied up for days dealing with Canterlot, and all the other cities and towns in Equestria. We have time. 2 of us will stay awake. The rest of us just sleep for a few hours, and then those 2 can rest. I'll stay awake. Raindrops volunteered as he blushed slightly, a look of embarrassment as the last thing anybody expected to see on her face. I, snore. Given how big I am right now. Amy, Dizzy 2 volunteered. I'm used to not getting a lot of sleep. I'm a mother. Okay, Charlie confirmed as she trotted forward. Let's see if we can't save the world once we've got cleared heads. Celestia lighted a tall bridge that overlooked the palace, about a half-mile away from it. Truly, the palace had seen better days. Far, far better days. To see the once proud structure fallen into disparate repair and ruin, fighting a losing battle against the encroaching vegetation of the Everfree Forest, nearly broke her heart. Perhaps, once Canterlot was dealt with, she would rebuild the palace and make her capital. Yes, it would be in the midst of the Everfree Forest, but for all its peculiarities, the Everfree was still made of leaves and wood, which would burn as easily as in any other forest. It would be a small matter for the rightful queen of Equestria to shape the Everfree to her desires. But she was getting ahead of herself. Glancing over her shoulder, she set down her hostages, surrounding them in fire once more. Albeit this time, it was as much for their protection against the savage monsters of the Everfree, as to keep them contained. Having done thus, she turned around once more to the palace, or intended to, but her attention was instead drawn to a much more interesting sight. Just at the bottom of the ridge she stood upon, in fact. Approaching her was a zebra, wearing a brown cloak, and so the zebra approached. As the zebra approached, she threw out the cloak, revealing, emblazoned on her flank, a cutie mark of a spiral surrounded by outward triangles. A sun. The zebra, Sakura, Celestia supposed, knelt once he had drawn close enough, head immediately pressed to the ground. It took a considerable amount of effort on Celestia's part, despite of how unqueen-like it would have been, to stop herself from exclaiming, "Finally!" at the sight. "Queen Corona, it gladdens me to set my sights upon your majesty," the zebra exclaimed wholeheartedly as he looked up. That ruined Celestia's good mood, but only a little. "Thy respect is genuine enough," Corona announced, "but thou shalt not address me by that name. Corona is a false title invented by my treacherous sister to assuage over her own guilt over her betrayal. I am Celestia." "As you wish it to be, I shall follow your decree," Celestia noted with some further dissatisfaction that Sakura seemed to have the same poor grasp of equestrian that every pony did these days. Celestia was no stranger to the evolution of languages. She herself did not know precisely how old she was, as neither did she nor Luna had bothered to keep track of the first millennia of their existences. But equestrian had reached a certain nobility 1,000 years ago, a nobility which had fallen far by the wayside in the intervening years of imprisonment, it seemed. Dissatisfied or no, however, the zebra's intentions were pure enough, and Celestia had a far more pressing concerns right now. She looked up for Sakura, to the ruined palace. "They have arrived." "It is so, my queen," Sakura said apologetically. "In the palace they convene. I would have stopped them before, but my skills are not those of war. I beg forgiveness of your majesty." "What skills dost thou possess then, Sakura?" Celestia asked, surprised that the zebra had not lied the last things he said. Had that peculiar zebra quirk also begun to fall by the wayside? "My queen, I am blessed with the gift of prophecy." "Ah, there it is," Celestia noted as one eyebrow raised. Aloud she continued. "Prophecy?" she inquired. "Certainly thou couldst have taken a grander steps to prevent any from challenging my right to rule with such a gift." The zebra bowed her head. "Forgive me, your highness, for being unable, but for some time the future has been unstable. Your return has been all I could see with my gift of prophecy. I do have other talents, brewing potions and rituals I can run. I used the last to aid your escape from the sun." Celestia had been looking again to the ruins of the palace, but froze slightly as he heard Sakura speaking, looking down at the zebra. "What?" she demanded. Thou believest that I require thine aid to free myself?" Sakura blinked. "The possibility of your return has been known to me for some time," she said cautiously, "and so, returning to the site of your sister's crime, using ancient testaments, I worked magic over the elements, created a storm of great power at the appropriate hour." "Silence!" Celestia exclaimed as he leapt down from the ridge and landed evenly in front of the zebra. "I require naught from thee! My escape was under my own power! The elements are strong, but I am the sun! Thou'st did nothing!" "Hey! Leave me alone!" Celestia had been glaring down at the zebra. To the mortal's credit, she didn't flee from the wrathful unicorn, but at the sound of the small voice from several feet away, she looked up. Charging toward her was a small, green and purple creature. He stumbled, however, when her gaze fell upon him, and looked terrified when the bright aurora wrapped around him and dragged him before Celestia. "What have we here?" Celestia asked as he held the creature in place, leaning down. "A little dragon? And thou knowest the zebra?" The alicorn looked at the zebra. "Thy familiar?" Sakura eyed the baby dragon, who was now looking like he had seriously reconsidered his suicidal charge. Celestia, however, only laughed as she leaned back, releasing the dragon from her grip. "Misplaced courage seems to have grown in abundance in my absence," she asserted. "Stupidity as well, but with my sister in charge for 1,000 years, this is hardly surprising. What is thy name, little dragon?" dragon stared, eyes wide. "Spike," he said. Celestia tapped a hoof to her chin and thought. "Spike! A simple name, for that I am grateful. Far too many dragons pick names of unnecessary length, and so the number of syllables in the names somehow grants some power." Celestia turned once more to Sakura. "Thou art in error, my servant. I did not require their aid. But, what is the saying? 'Tis the idea that matters." Spike looked for a moment like he wanted to speak, but then thought better of it. Celestia turned, leaping once more onto the ridge, looking back to the palace. She had wasted a significant amount of time dealing with the zebra and dragon. For all she knew, the treacherous ponies, perhaps prepared by her sister for this very eventuality, had already corrupted the elements, and were waiting even now for her to strike. Regardless, the elements would be protecting the palace from any great works of magic, at least from this distance. She could not simply call down a solar flare and immolate the palace. No. She would need, instead, to test the water somehow. Something that would be enough to reveal whether or not the ponies already had the elements, but which would not put her in danger. Not that she was afraid, just cautious. Celestia's eyes once more turned to Sakura, then to Spike. They lingered on him for some time, before she smiled, and her horn began to glow. And now, the grand finale, for all of you to enjoy. The sixth element of Longest Day, Longest Night. This is chapter 16. Trixie's special talent was magic in general, but her chosen specialty was illusion spells. Spells that created ghost sounds or false sensations, or which manipulated light and shadow to create fake images or impressions. Of the numerous tricks she had both learned and developed herself, her favorite was, by far, the light-bending glamour that allowed her to turn invisible, followed closely by his companion spell that negated the sound of her hoofsteps. It was just so useful to not be seen or heard by anybody, and therefore become privy to things she probably shouldn't have been. Trixie used her invisibility glamour more often than any other spell she knew by far. It's been so sure that she knew just about everything about being invisible. As it turned out, she was wrong, as she overlooked something significant, yet obvious in hindsight. While invisible, her eyelids were transparent. This was not particularly conducive to achieving sleep, especially during Corona's perpetual midday. Ordinarily, it was too bright out, she would have simply pulled her hat down over her eyes. But she was beginning to understand why, if not how, the poison joke had rendered that and her cape invisible as well. Thus, no matter how exhausted she was, sleep was not coming. "Stupid poison joke!" Trixie proclaimed loudly. No pony could hear her anyway, so she didn't feel the need to keep quiet. She turned her attention to Carrot Top. "It's stupid, you! Raindrops had wings, you idiot! This was your fault, and mine! Because I followed you, because I'm an idiot too! A bigger idiot! And Lyra, if you hadn't overchanneled, I wouldn't be in this situation either! And then none of you should have fallen in here! Corona shouldn't have escaped! Luna should have been able to kick her flank! She was useless! Morons! Idiots! Fools! All of us! We are all idiots! Wow! That was cathartic." Carrot Top let out a slight sigh. She had managed to fall asleep, somehow. Possibly because she had an excellent blanket in the form of a mane and tail that finally stopped growing at around 20 feet in length, give or take a yard. Trixie had considered burying herself under the pony's hair, but several things stopped her. Firstly, she thought of sleeping wrapped in a blanket made from another pony's hair was more than a little creepy, especially one she barely knew. Secondly, Trixie was fairly certain covering her eyes in a hair blanket would be uncomfortable. But the third, and probably overriding reason, was that doing so would require getting out from underneath Ditsy Doo's wing. Despite the Pegasus comment about used to being long hours, she had fallen asleep while sitting next to Trixie. Raindrops had noticed, but hadn't done or said anything about it. Trixie had almost moved when Ditsy muttered a name in her sleep. Dinkies. Trixie could be a terrifically cruel pony at times, but even she couldn't bring herself to wake Ditsy Doo from whatever dream she was in with her daughter. It was good to escape from reality sometimes, even if for only a little while. Of course, that's what I've basically done, Trixie observed. Escaped from reality. I'm a reality expatriate. Good on me. Or really, it's more like I was subbed from reality by the poison joke. This is a stupid flower. Hate, 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 hate! Dizzy Dew shifted a little. Her wings gripped lightning on Trixie for a moment. Trixie did her best not to flinch as she sighed, laying her head on her hooves, his eyes looking around the plaza as he examined it out for mind-numbing boredom. Ordinarily, if forced to sit on one place for a time, she would have been practicing her illusions, amusing herself in one way or another with them. But the poison joke had rendered even her magic invisible. All she could do was sit and wait for the sheer exhaustion to force her to sleep. Sit and wait, wait, sit, wait, sit, wait. Yeah, this isn't happening, Trixie thought. Hear me now, O thou bleak and unbearable world, Trixie sang idly, trying to keep herself amused somehow. Thou art base and debauched as can be, and the knight with his banner so bravely unfurled, thou hurls down his gauntlet to thee. I am Don Rosciante, hero of Equestria, and I am an awful singer. Trixie laughed at her own interruption, looking to Lyra. Right? Gah! Stars! That's right. You can't hear me. Lyra, like Trixie, had not been able to sleep. She was sitting in a back-breaking position again, leaning against the wall with her harp, lyre, whatever, and hoof, gently plucking out a slow, sad melody. Lyra's eyes were closed, and she looked like she had totally lost herself in whatever she was playing. Some tears in her eyes. It was obvious she was thinking about Bon Bon. Ugh! Trixie objected, looking to Cheerly's sleeping form. Well, it was a good idea while it lasted, Cheerly. The magenta pony had been doing a good job of keeping all their minds on anything other than Corona, but the admittedly necessary sleep was giving Ditsy Dew and Lyra all the time they needed to focus on their losses. Trixie looked down, tapping her hooves on the plaza beneath her. Not that it made any sound. The slush had been cleared away too, to give them some place to sleep. Trixie's telekinesis had still been unable to affect it. Trixie tried to come up with a plausible explanation for why she couldn't touch or affect slush, but could touch and oppose, affect other ponies and the elements of harmony. But the best she could conjure up was, "It's magic! You don't have to explain it!" "Bored," Trixie stated. Bored. Somewhere in the Everfree, there was a roar. What was that? Carrot Top asked, even as she struggled to get out from under her own hair. It was not an easy task. I don't know, Raindrops whispered, as he cautiously stood, careful not to step on any pony. The roar came a second time, this time followed by a crashing sound in the far distance, like trees being shoved out of the way. A sound which was getting louder, or closer. Raindrop said, not bothering to keep her voice down as she got up on her hind legs, affording her a better view of the direction the sound was coming from, roughly in the direction of the castle's tower. Her eyes widened when she saw whatever it was. Hide! Hide now! The 5 other ponies, well, 4, but Raindrops assumed that Trixie was smart enough to follow suit, did so by running back to the former court. Cheerily and invisible Trixie helping Carrot Top with her mane and tail. Lyra grabbing the elements with telekinesis and dragging them as far back as they would go. Ditsy, instead of taking to the air, looking in the same direction Raindrops was soon, as he was a good 50 feet or so. Is that Spike? Ditsy began, when the crashing sound stopped as the sound of displaced air reached her ears. Whatever was coming had leapt into the air. Moments later, it came crashing down inside of the courtyard, hunched over at first, but quickly rearing to a full 40 feet height, and letting out a roar that was felt more than heard. dragon, mostly purple, with a pale underbelly, and a long series of green, wickedly sharp spines running from the top of its head down its spine, the top of a long, whip-like tail that ensured that the dragon was at least twice as long as it was tall. It was, further, sported a pair of large bat-like wings, covered in purple scales, and with a translucent green membrane between the fingers. "Spike?" Dizzy-Doo asked. The dragon turned its gaze to her and let loose another bellow. Then charged forward at Raindrops. The giant Pegasus leered up and lashed out with her hooves. Neither hoof connected, but the dragon did stop its assault and creep backwards, affording the giant Pegasus new respect even as it growled in anger. "How are you looking at that and thinking Spike?" Raindrops demanded as he fell back onto all fours, beating her wings a few times as he adopted a fighting stance. Wings out, 3 hooves on the ground, but her right hoof raised and ready to strike. "Spike!" The dragon hissed, as it too adopted a 4-legged posture and began drawing in a deep breath. Both Ditsy and Raindrops stared at the sylbiant, deep, yet somehow familiar tone to its voice, even as the back of the dragon's throat began to glow a sickly green, licks of flame escaping from the slightly clenched teeth. "Spike! Hungry! Spike! Mad!" The dragon exhaled a gout of green fire. Raindrops leapt forward instinctively, spinning her wings and beating them frantically, sending a gust of air downwards. Apparently cruel though even Poison Joe could be, it hadn't robbed her of ability to fly. Unfortunately, it hadn't done much for her speed or agility either, and a portion of Spike's flames caught the tip of her tail, singeing it. The dragon leapt into the air as soon as it had finished exhaling, grasping Raindrops by a back leg and throwing her down into the plaza below. The Pegasus landed on her shoulder without breaking anything. Getting up just as her foe landed nearby, mouth once more glowing green. "Spike, burn! And smash! And eat!" The dragon proclaimed. That didn't work as well as it had the first time, however. Raindrops leapt right at it, bringing her right hoof down on top of its muzzle. The dragon's jaw snapped shut, making it bite off maybe 6 inches of its long tongue as it did so, and staggered under the blow. Then began coughing and belching green-tinted smoke as the fire it had been preparing forcefully quenched. It was too preoccupied to notice Raindrops raise her hoof a second time, this time striking the dragon's back, where its 2 shoulders met. It collapsed to the plaza floor with a loud roar of rage, claws scrabbling into slush and tiled stone as it scurried backwards from Raindrops. Or tried to. Raindrops followed its every step, hooves coming down as he tried to step on the beast, which suddenly seemed considerably less eager to dine on Pony Flambe. Its back was quickly against the wall, however, and on realizing this, its expressive changed from concern to terrified. "Wait!" Dizzy-Doo called. "That is Spike!" Raindrops stopped her stomping advance, resuming the pose he had struck earlier. And he was trying to eat us!" she noted, her eyes never leaving the dragon, though they did narrow as she regarded it. "Which, by the way, why?" The dragon didn't answer as it remained pressed against the wall, wings held high in defense, eyes darting between Raindrops and Dizzy-Doo, looking at the latter hungrily, but the former with a considerable amount of fear. "He's not in his right mind," Dizzy-Doo noted. Maybe that Poison Joke stuff? We need to find Sakura."
10 bits says he ate her,"
Raindrops said, as he noticed movement from the corner of her eye. The others were coming out from where they had taken cover, slowly, making sure to stay close to the wall and well out of the way of Spike and Raindrops.
"How can you tell that's Spike?"
"I just can't," Dizzy explained, though not helpfully, as he alighted atop Raindrop's head and stared at Spike. "Spike, what happened?" The dragon was breathing heavily.
"Hungry! Mad!"
it hissed, teeth still clenched. Its head ripped around to Raindrops.
"Hung!"
It shouted as it lensed at raindrops again. Once more, it received a hoof square to the jaw, sending it reeling backwards and into the courtyard's wall. The structure proved too much for the ancient structure, and it crumbled under his impact, sending the dragon sprawling under the collapsing stone and mortar. You're good at that, Lyra noted from the back wall.
Iron hoof martial arts.
Raindrops explained.
The discipline helps when I get really angry. This is sort of what's happening right now.
Dizzy Dew took to the air once more, staring down at the dragon as it laid in a rumble. Breathing heavily and blinking rapidly, for its eyes rolled back, and it began to glow with the same sickly green glow its fire had possessed. The glow obscured its features, but began to shrink and compress, and after several moments, there was no longer a massive, winged, hungry-looking purple worm, but instead, a tiny, green and purple baby dragon growing in pain. Okay, what? Cheerily asked, as the ponies, sans raindrops, picked their way over the debris. Carrot Top having a harder time than most thanks to her hair getting caught in just about everything. But she seemed determined not to be left behind. And towards Spike, just as the baby dragon slipped into unconsciousness. A few tentative pokes from Dizzy Dew got no real response for him.
Somebody explain to me what the heck just happened!
Raindrops exclaimed, almost stopping her hoof in frustration before she managed to stop herself, as if it might have brought the entire palace ruins crashing down.
Is this normal for dragons or what?
I don't think... Carrot Top began. There was an explosion in the sky. A blast of heat that shoved the ponies who were standing to the ground, covering their ears with their forelegs, and shouting in fright at the sudden sound. Even Raindrops was forced to the ground. Then wings, the sound of large wings beating steadily. Then all was black. Consciousness was a thing that had to be grabbed with teeth and telekinesis and dragged kicking and screaming back to Trixie. She woke only slowly to the too bright sight of fire and a glaring sun overhead that penetrated her invisible eyelids with impunity. Not to mention a white aurora wrapped firmly around her being that glowed of its own accord, keeping her pressed to the now dry ground and outlined for all to see. Carrie was the next thing to return. She heard the cackling of flames, yes, but over that, she heard the whimpers and sobs of frightened foals, and the hushed assurances of other ponies, trying to keep them calm. Trixie couldn't move her head thanks to the aura, but her eyes were her own still. Glancing around, she saw, beyond the flames that surrounded her in a wide circle, a second fiery prison, far larger than her own, and holding dozens of ponies in place. Even above those sounds, however, Trixie heard a voice. I do not understand this foreign mindset that grips you, Corona said, looking around with just her eyes. Trixie saw her 5 companions, each trapped in circles of flame and held in place by a white aurora of their own, though at least they were standing. Even Raindrops was held in place with no additional effort on Corona's part, while Carrot Top's mane and tail had been wrapped around in her way that might have been funny were they in any other situation. The tyrant's sun was facing them, wings spread wide, with the obsidian statue and the 5 orbs that contained the elements behind her. Were my intentions not clear? Corona asked as she folded her wings against her body and began to pace back and forth in front of the ponies. Was I not precise? Did I not tell you the exact consequence for actions such as this? She slid the hoof at the elements. Do you not care for your friends and loved ones? You're meant to having no true plan, she continued, yet you would defy me anyway. And I tell you now, the elements would not have worked for creatures such as you. You are mere ponies! It takes alicorn magic to direct the elements, even in the inert, corrupted state that Luna left them in. Corona looked between the 5 of them, like they were children being scolded. Raindrops was managing to meet her glare head-on, while Terry and Carrot Top were desperately trying to look away. The all they could move was their eyes. Lyra and Dissitube, meanwhile, were alternating between watching Corona and looking into the crowd of captured ponies. Trixie couldn't see Bonbon or Ditzy, but she knew they were in there. Somewhere. And thou! Corona intoned, looking to Trixie, perfectly aware of Trixie being awake, and more to the point, having no difficulty seeing her. Trixie was lifted up, and stood like a doll or figurine, her muscles straining against the aura that gripped her, and yet unable to move. Thou! Whom I entrusted with the governance of that settlement, yet you had waited not a moment before turning against thy queen. I revised my opinion of thee yet again. Thou art not brave, thou art not even a coward, nor an opportunist. Thou art simply stupid. She leaned in close to Trixie. Stupidity has a price. A very, very dear price. Trixie blinked a few times. She began, surprised Corona was letting her speak. Surprised even more when the alicorn's head turned slightly, indicating that the tyrant's son heard her. It was my idea. It was all my idea. Don't! Silence! Corona commanded, making a sleepy gesture with one wing as her horn flared. I will believe no more of thy lies. Even if thou were telling the truth, it would matter not. Thy idea it may have been, but they endorsed it. It is unfortunate indeed that I have yet allies in Equestria, or I might have been unaware of that thy treachery. Allies? Trixie's eyes echoed wide. She echoed before narrowing. Zakora! Indeed. Corona observed, a wide smile as he drew back, looking to the side and turning Trixie's head as he did, sitting, no, kneeling in obstinance. To the tyrant's son was the zebra, cloak still removed. Somehow, Trixie was able to take note of the fact that on her flank was a stylized sun cutie mark. She had lied about not having one, it seemed, though that hardly came as a surprise. But why? That was still the question. What pony, what anything, would be insane enough to support Corona? Corona continued to glare at them like they were all children, who had been caught with their hooves in the cookie jar. At length, she shook her head. I have much to do, she said. I can waste no more time on traitors while this Catalan defies me. She turned her back on the sixth pony, instead facing her captives. Yet, behold that I am merciful. Far from here, Ponyville sits peacefully and orderly as I commanded. 'Tis only these six who defy my orders, and so my wrath shall fall solely upon them. The captive ponies seemed anything but grateful for Corona's mercy, but the white alicorn didn't take notice of it as he turned it back around. First, she proclaimed, looking to the statue in the elements, I shall deal with far older traitors than you. She raised one hoof and slammed it to the ground, even as her horn glowed. The impact sent a reverberation through the ground as strong as any earthquake, and as well as a crackling sound like thunder. In front of the pony's eyes, the obsidian statue, and the stones that were the elements of harmony, shattered. There was a brief flare of magic from east, but nothing. Trixie felt another thing shatter. Hope. All of it. Everywhere, but most especially in her. Whatever dark magic my sister used on the elements, Corona proclaimed as he used the hoof to brush them aside, rendered them corrupt and base. They were gone long ago. Only these black echoes remained. But I do not need them, for I am Celestia! I am the sun! Corona chuckled slightly. Eyes focusing on Trixie. The blue unicorn was aware of the white aura that surrounded her, leaving her body. The flames around her dying. In fact, the same had happened for all her companions, after all. What could they do? Run? What was the point? Corona didn't even seem to notice that Trixie was invisible. beg? For what reason could Corona be convinced to spare them? Fight? Against the beating that had tossed Luna aside like a rag doll? Trixie stared at the plaza beneath her, tears in her eyes, real tears. The first she had cried in stars knew how long. She had failed. She failed in everything. She managed to take these 5 ponies with her in the process. This was it. Everything was over. Luna was gone. Camelot would fall to Corona's flames. The elements were destroyed. The tyrant sun would forever reign over all Equestria. Trixie looked at the 5 ponies she doomed. 3 of them, Shirley, Carrot Tops, and even Raindrops, had looks on their faces that had to mirror Trixie's own, maybe even surpass hers. Dizzy Doo and Lyra, meanwhile, were both focused on the ponies that Corona held captive. On Dicky Doo and Bon Bon, most likely, seeing them where Trixie couldn't. It's trying to ensure that the last sight they held out was that they were the loved ones. Corona wouldn't even give them that as she approached. Wings spread wide, blocking their view. As her blank eyes looked to each one of them, her eyes settled on Trixie, voluntarily. Thou shalt go first! It's you shall, you throwback! For a few moments, silence, rather than Corona, reigned over Equestria. Corona's eyes were surprisingly wide, and every pony, even Shirley herself, seemed to need a moment to comprehend what the magenta pony, the school teacher, had just said. I beg thy minuscule pardon, Corona demanded. You! Shirley shouted, eyes wide as he stepped forward. It's you! No pony has used thou or thee or thy for hundreds of years, and it shall, no matter who's the subject. I don't care! Shirley! Lyra interrupted the Earth Pony's tirade. Or tried to. It didn't work. And if you have been locked up in the sun for 1,000 years, you said Luna would be able to watch Equestria, or so I could only assume that you too. How could you not know how to speak Equestrian? Corona's eyes narrowed as he seemed to take a surprising amount of offense from a being that she considered so far beneath her. My command of the tongue far surpasses thy own mingle. You're hysterical. Shirley laughed. After a moment, after realizing what Shirley was laughing at, Raindrops and Carrot Top both joined in. Corona only stared uncomprehendingly. Shirley leaned forward, echoing. She licked her lips. Well, Lyra says I'm out of practice. Maybe you could show me some of your command. Corona's eyes fluttered rapidly at that for a moment as realization of how Shirley and the other two were interpreting her words hit her. She recoiled. It was a very interesting sight, seeing the tyrant's son blushing in embarrassment and utterly flabbergasted. Thou dare? Yeah, I do, Shirley proclaimed. She set her hooves, even though she prepared to take the brunt of a charge. Tears still stained her eyes, but they were narrowed and jouncing. I'm dead anyway, so why not? I'm going to die laughing, and I'm going to make everybody else laugh at how ridiculous you are! For the second time in far too recent memory, there was an explosion, though this one was far smaller than whatever one that had occurred on Corona's arrival. Centered on the number of shards that Corona had shattered the elements into. They took on a light blue glow and shot off into the ground, arcing toward and orbit Shirley's neck. What? The alicorn demanded as he retreated several more steps at the sight. What black sorcery is this? Shirley stared at the stones orbiting her neck, seemingly unsure of herself and blinking away her tears. I think, she said, then giggled slightly amazing. I'm the element of laughter now. What? Trixie demanded. She ignored the fact that no pony could hear her. It still had to be said. Why? Lyra wiped her own tears away from her eyes as she looked at her second oldest friend. The elements made the world, the alicorn noted as she stood and cautiously approached her friend. They're not a bunch of rocks. You can't destroy them! But why Charlie? Carrot Top asked. Because she said she was the element of laughter? Charlie shook her head. Not because of that. Because I made ponies laugh. I made Raindrops and Carrot Top laugh right when it mattered most. When everything looked doomed. Or earlier in the forest, Daisy Doo said, both her eyes focused on Charlie. That school activity you made us do. You made us laugh to forget our troubles. It matters not! Corona proclaimed, stopping her hoof as her horn glowed. A bolt of hot white light lashed towards Charlie, or tried to. Lyra saw it and leapt in the way, closing her eyes and preparing for the end, and finding herself pleasantly disappointed when instead she landed evenly on her hooves, neck now orbited by another collection of shattered stones. Corona's beam of death having been harmlessly deflected away into the sky. The shards were glowing red. What? Lyra interrupted her, albeit without realizing she was doing so. Loyalty! She said, as though it were both obvious and a great revelation. The element of loyalty. Because of the forest. Because I wouldn't let the sirens get any of you. No matter what. Even if it killed me. One by one, the remaining shards of the elements picked themselves off the ground, levitating and glowing and forming a barrier between Corona and the 6 ponies, but not moving further. Corona's head was whipping around as he looked at between each of them, eyes wide as he tried desperately to understand what was going on. She wasn't the only one. Trixie stomped a hoof. But why? She asked. Even if no pony could hear her, why now? Lyra and Charlie looked to Raindrops, who looked down at them. I don't get it. Like I said, Lyra explained. The elements can't be destroyed. They made the world. Not even Corona could destroy them. That is not my name! Corona shouted from behind the barrier the element's shards had created as he glared upwards. The sun flared brightly, and a jet of flame and plasma shot down from it toward the ponies. The shards glowed, however, and the flare splashed against a multi-hued shield without effect, hundreds of feet before them. All that reached them was a wind, although admittedly a strong one, strong enough to blow Trixie's hat from her head. The elements aren't something physical, Charlie said, but they do need containers. Those containers were always those rocks. But I guess they don't have to be. They could be ponies too. That is ridiculous! Trixie shouted, not caring that no pony could hear her. There's more magic in one element than in Corona and Luna combined! They kill any normal pony! Trixie blinked a few times, even as she said that, looking between Charlie and Lyra, and how they seemed very much alive and unharmed. Right? A series of shards separated from the wall they had created, and began orbiting around Carrot Top, taking a purple glow, which spread throughout Carrot Top's body. Her hair changed color, back to its normal orange, and both her mane and tail began to shrink down to her normal length. Her eyes widened at the sight. Generosity? She exclaimed. How do I know that? Because what else would you get? Lyra asked. You watched through poison joke for me. Any pony else noticing a pattern here? Charlie said with a smile, looking to the ponies. I think the elements want us as the new containers. Us. We've all earned them, trying to get here, trying to get them to get rid of Corona. We want to protect the world they created. The elements aren't alive, Trixie objected. To her own ears, though, she sounded far from sure. In that case, Raindrops observed, even as the shards took up an orbit around her neck and began shrinking her down to normal size. glowing yellow orange as they did. Honesty! That's the one I want. That's the one I am! She reached her normal size, and she offered something of a smile as she checked her hooves and looked over her normal-sized body again. But I think I earned it before the Everfree. When we were in Carrot Top's house. When I convinced all of us to go on this. Stay honest with ourselves. What we knew we had to do, whether or not we wanted to. Sounds about right. Ditsy Doo blinked a few times, even as the last series of shards, green, began to twirl around her throat. Oh no, she said, shaking her head. No, not kindness. I don't deserve... Shut up. Yes, you do, Raindrop said as she came out to her fellow Pegasus, rubbing a hoof on her head. And don't try to call me wrong. Apparently, I'm a reliable source. She jerked her hoof at the shard satellites. But you stopped Raindrops from pounding Spike's face, Carrot Top noted. You had no reason to do that. He wasn't himself. It wouldn't have been right. And, Lyra said, let's be honest. You're the only one who's been able to constantly put up with Trixie despite her being a gigantic jerk. Hey! Trixie ejected. She's not a jerk, Ditsy Doo pointed out. She was so stressed. And she hasn't been a jerk at all since we came into Everfree. See? Cheerily said, smiling. And I happen to have it on good authority from a student of mine that you are the hardest working, best mother in the world. Ditsy Doo blinked, looking down at the shards. Yeah. Kindness. Okay. I can get behind that, I guess. Trixie looked between the 5 other ponies standing beside her, all of whom were glowing slightly, surrounded by an evanescent aura of energy. It occurred to Trixie, idly, that Corona had been lashing out at them the whole time, with fire, lightning, with tremendous magical power. None of it got through, or even came close to getting through. The multicolored barrier that the elements had created between the 6 of them and the tyrant sun, but it doesn't matter! Trixie ejected, even as Corona stopped throwing magic, glaring and breathing heavily, actually winded. Trixie looked to Corona, who stared back at her. It doesn't matter! We still don't have the 6th element! Corona paused at that, chuckling. Thou art correct! She intoned, then laughed out loud. She is right. I have nothing to fear for this life, so I know not what dark magics you have worked over the former elements, but you don't have them all. The element of magic isn't here. I have to but wait for this polished trick to run its course, and then I shall have you at my mercy. Trixie paused. She stared. Her mouth hung open for several moments before words made their way out. The element of magic? She asked. Corona glared at her. Yes, fool! Know you not the list of elements? Who are you talking to? Dizzy asked. Oh, Trixie! We forgot her! Her eyes swept over the courtyard. Where is she? Kindness, laughter, generosity, honesty, loyalty, and magic? Trixie asked incredulously. Of course! Corona proclaimed, leaning toward Trixie. All the other used elements are useless without magic. It is power! Who but the power can afford to be caring or giving? Who but the powerful can expect sincerity or faithfulness for those they surround themselves by? Who but the powerful can waste their days in comfort and joy? Trixie felt a hoof hit her head, a little harder than its owner. It's clearly properly intended. Ah! Found her, she said. The rest of the ponies, who had been reaching out blindly, stopped and stared at Cheerilee as he wrapped her hoof around what must have been, to them, looked like nothing. Trixie, like I said, there seems to be a kind of pattern here. By which she means, Lyra said, coming up to Trixie's right, that we're pretty sure we're all supposed to have an element. Maybe it's our destiny or something. Or maybe it's just random chance. Dizzy said with a shrug as he placed herself in front of Trixie for a moment, staring to where she must have guessed Trixie's eyes were. Does it really matter? With that, she went and stood by Lyra's right. What matters is that you pony up, she said as he tapped Trixie on the head a few times, then sitting down on Cheerilee's right side. Come on! Corona just figured out everything for you! It's the element of magic. Oh! Carrot Top said after a moment. She also got in front of Trixie, looking at her and where her supposed eyes were, a broad grin on her features. And I just noticed something. Remember Princess Luna's stupid riddle? With that, she trotted over to Ditsy Doo's right, though she kept her eyes focused on the empty space that Trixie occupied. Take a look beside you. Trixie blinked a few times at that, doing so. To her left was Lyra and Ditsy Doo and Carrot Top. To her right, Raindrops and Cheerilee. Beside her. Beside her. People, if you feel the urge to play a really great rock song at the moment like this, be my guest. I've already got a few options. The sixth element is magic! Trixie reads it aloud, closing her eyes. To her surprise, it worked! That was, she managed to block out her view of her world. Opening her eyes, she saw that somehow she had become visible again. Maybe due to the proximity of the other elements. In fact, yes, that was definitely it. That was a clue. She knew. The sixth element is magic! Trixie repeated, and it's right beside me. You're all right beside me! A regular genius, you, Raindrops noted. So what? Trixie asked, looking to her left and right, trying to puzzle things through. She lived with Luna for 10 years. She should have been better at puzzles. Ponies are magic. Mares are magic. The elements are magic. What? Friendship is magic. Cheerilee suggested. Stop ignoring me! Corona shouted. I am thy queen! I am the sun! Give me respect that I am due! Trixie ignored her. You're not my friends. She said, you all hate me. Cheerilee laughed. Trixie, we don't hate you. So you could be a jerk. So what? So can every pony. But we wouldn't be here without you. You made my muffin smile, Dinky Doo pointed out. That makes you a friend in my book. You also watched me replace a joke for me, Lyra pointed out. You helped my fall, Carrot Top added. And, well, your heart was in the right place with the Weather for Hire team, Raindrops admitted, so, yeah. Friends. Friends. Trixie's eyes were wide. Friends. She echoed softly. Good. Now, could you hurry up and figure out how to get the element of magic already so that... There was a bright flash of lavender from above Trixie, and an orb of that same color appeared in front of her head. Trixie stared into it. Somehow, it stared back, and Trixie got the distinct impression that it liked what it saw. Already did, Trixie observed, as the orbs and the stones surrounding each other pony flashed and coalesced around them. In the case of others, of Trixie's friends, they became golden necklaces, emblazoned with arcane designs, and each holding a gem of a different color, that took the shape of their cutie marks. In Trixie's case, the orb of light became a tiara that set itself upon her head, glowing with radiant energy. And Trixie saw something. Maybe everything. She felt herself, and her friends, being lifted off the ground by a magical force. Their bodies glowing painfully bright. Corona backed away at the sight. No! The tyrant's son exclaimed. No! This is impossible! You are mortals! You cannot wield the power of the elements! Any pony could! Trixie said as she felt eldritch energy gathering around her. But oddly, not within her. And each of her friends, yes, but she, herself, contained nothing. Not yet. That wasn't magic's role in this. Any pony could have become the elements. You're wrong, Corona. Power isn't magic. Friendship is magic. Corona paused at that. That, she proclaimed, is the stupidest, most insipid, worthless dross I have ever heard! The eldritch energies that had been gathering in the others now left them, and floated to Trixie. Now she felt her body brimming with magic. She could never have gathered it on her own, but that was the point. Now that it was gathered, however, she was the one who aimed it. She pointed a hoof at Corona. The white alicorn stood firm. Thou shalt not banish me once more to the sun, she proclaimed shyly. I have sealed away my treacherous sister. With her gone, and I as well, who will move the heavens? You think of something! Corona's eyes widened at that. No! She exclaimed, as a rainbow-hued beam shot out upwards from the ponies and began arcing down toward her. She beat her wings, taking to the air frantically and sailing away, but she couldn't outrun the prismatic force that chased her. It caught up to Corona just as she passed over the tower of the ruined palace, and she fell down to its roof, the rainbow wrapping around her and assaulting her. Heist! The Ream! Bow! Mother! Fracker! No! The tyrant's son repeated in defiance as the light grew brighter. No! I shall not fall to thee! I am Celestia! I am the sun! Trixie wanted to remark on that, to say something witty, but she couldn't, as the last power that the elements had gathered chose that moment to leave her body. She gasped as the sudden vacuum of magic within her as she and her friends were lowered to the ground. Their descent mercifully gentle, at least until whatever held them up failed and they all collapsed. Lyra had just enough time to hear Lyra groan, "Not again," before everything once more plunged into darkness.